need to talk to you because a lot of people don't fully understand why it is I'm doing what I'm doing as an evangelist in Europe. I really believe that right from the beginning, God called me as an evangelist and a missionary in Europe. And it really began right from the beginning when I was only 18 years old. And I was pastoring a church in the south of England. And I was still a student in the Bible college. And when it came to the vacation in the college, I decided to rent a tent, put this tent up. And the people that I called to work with me were a Russian ballerina and a Polish man who'd been in the German SS. Now, they were refugees from the war. This was it was 1950, just after the war finished when this happened. And so that really was the beginning. But then God was to so strongly put this on me. And eventually I got a challenge from God. And the challenge from God was this, that I knew that the Iron Curtain would collapse. This was after my imprisonment, after my years of working there. And I was, of course, involved in Bible smuggling, working with the underground churches. But in the early 80s, I sensed this move over there, which was to culminate in the collapse of the Iron Curtain. And God had challenged me to do this. And when God challenged me with the vision was to break down this barrier, to let the power of God, which was now evident strongly in the West, and I was seeing people converted, I was seeing the power of God, and because I was working in the East, I became so conscious that with all the restrictions under communism, this freedom, this religious freedom, was not there. And already I'd been imprisoned, and I knew what the punishment was, I knew what the suffering was. And in the early 1980s, 10 years after I'd been in prison, I began to get this vision of what God would do. In the end, it became so clear that I had to set up a conference in Germany, in West Germany, in Karlsruhe, and bring together people from both sides of the Iron Curtain in a great conference so that those from the East could experience something of what we had, and particularly something that I had, which was a real fire from God. It took me more than 2 years to organize, and eventually in 1988, we set up this conference in Germany in a place called Karlsruhe. And we actually had more than 4,000 people came that first year. Of them, almost 1,000 were coming through the Iron Curtain, if you can imagine. I don't know how they managed. Some of them came on foot, by train, with broken down old cars, but how they managed to get visas, they came. And we held this great conference. The rest, of course, were from the West. And it began something. Now, I believed that this was just a one-off conference. But before the end of the conference, the amazing thing was God said to me, you've got to do it again. And I want to show you, you can actually see on screen some of the pictures from those days of what was happening. And this was to lead on to the move, where eventually we held the second conference in '89, and at the end of that conference there was a move because the Iron Curtain began to open after that second conference. We continued the conferences right on until Russia came free, and there was a freedom for me to go. And so what happened was, as the freedom came, I would go back with these people who'd come across the Iron Curtain and begin to evangelize. And one of the most amazing things I'm going to show you in a moment on screen, because, all right, the pictures are old and maybe not quite as good as I would like, but look, let me just show you here from a place called Mayaki, a little village near Odessa in the south of the Ukraine. And let me explain what happened. Simply, a pastor of a church had set these conferences up, and we had up to 20,000 people coming in a muddy field, not a football stadium, not an arena, just a muddy field with up to 20,000 people coming. And that was the beginning of the real spiritual breakthrough. And then when I challenged the people and said, well, how do we follow this? They said, right, we follow it. You've got to go to Kiev. And we moved to Kiev, and the power of God moved to Kiev. But then the whole thing was opening up. And God called me to go then into Siberia. And it was in the early 1990s, this was 93, I made that first visit to Siberia. I saw what was happening there, and God really opened my heart up to take 400 people with me for 3 months to evangelize right across Siberia. I mean, can you imagine? Here we are, I'm just a Westerner, and to go to the far extreme in Siberia. And I want to show you some of the pictures from Siberia. And if you can imagine what happened, we were there with 400 people for 3 months. We didn't have very much money. We were living in extremely difficult conditions. Traveling was almost impossible. But the power of God began to come down in an amazing way. We were in football stadiums. We were in cinemas. We were in the open air. But we just spent 3 months evangelizing the whole of that area. But the thing is, that was just now a beginning. And we were to continue working in Russia in a tremendous way. You see, I know that in 1889, a famous British man, a missionary to China called Hudson Taylor, God gave him a remarkable vision. And in that vision, God showed him that the last great spiritual awakening, and I'm talking about spiritual awakening, not religion, would begin in Russia, and then it would spread from Russia to the rest of Europe, and then Jesus Christ would return to earth, literally and physically. Now, because God had confirmed this to me in an amazing way, and I was seeing now these remarkable meetings all over Russia and Siberia and beyond Siberia in the Far East. I was in Magadan, I was in Vladivostok, I was in Chita, but in all, I've been in something like between 150 and 200 different towns and villages all over Russia. And we ended up by being able to broadcast on secular television, not satellite, but the ordinary box in the corner. And most Russians had television because the communists used it for propaganda. And we got an opportunity on 2 Christmases, 2 Easters, to broadcast to about 80% of Russians and show them the power of God in action. You see, what was the challenge? The challenge was to show the power of God in action, and to show that the God of the Bible is alive, that Jesus is real, that, okay, so he died, he lived on earth, he died 2,000 years ago, but he didn't stay dead, he's alive. And this is one of the evidences of our own life after death. Death is not an end. And I want you to understand that the power of God is real today. And so the power of God came down on these meetings. And then when we began to broadcast on television, thousands of people, tens, hundreds of thousands of people all over Russia were able to see in a former communist country where they taught that there was no God, that religion was dead, that there was nothing, and where they killed and persecuted so many believers. And I'm showing you here some of the pictures. And then the power of God came down in a remarkable way. But that was only the beginning. Because then Hudson Taylor's prophecy, this missionary to China, living over 100 years ago, had seen this prophecy that what happened would begin in Russia and then spread. Well, it spread into the Ukraine. We saw the power of God in the Ukraine. And then God gave me a vision that it could move beyond the Ukraine and into the rest of Europe. And so we started something new. God put in my heart that we should move into the Baltic countries. And I remember our first venture into the Baltic countries was into Estonia. And we had a meeting there, which to my mind was quite small. But it was so significant because there were outstanding miracles of healing. And we're going to show you in the series of programs some of the outstanding miracles of healing. And so outstanding were these miracles in Estonia that I dismissed the whole thing and said, oh, this is small, this is not this great move of God spreading. But because of that, 5 years later, people who remembered it called me to come into Tallinn. And so now I went into Tallinn and this time set up a big evangelistic mission. God answers by power. And the miracles happen. And God is going to do that here in Tallinn. Welcome to the conference.
Добро пожаловать на конференцию.
But I am here to show you the power of God's word.
Я здесь для того, чтобы показать вам силу Слова Божия.
And so I want to begin by reading what God's word says. The very person that the world questions today. The person that the world wants to deny.
See on see isik, keda osa maailmast tahab lihtsalt maha salata või eitada.
Личность, которую мир хочет отвергнуть.
Jesus is alive.
Jeesus elab.
Иисус жив.
And here in this conference,
Ja siin sellel konverentsil,
И здесь, на этой конференции,
I want to show you who this Jesus is.
ma tahan näidata sulle, kes see Jeesus on.
я хочу показать вам, кто этот Иисус.
But for so many people,
Kuid nii paljude inimeste jaoks,
Но для так многих людей
there is no one to turn to in the hour of trouble.
neil ei ole mitte kellegi poole pöörduda siis, kui nemad satuvad hätta.
им некому обратиться во времена беды.
The Bible says,
Kuid piibel ütleb,
Библия говорит,
God says to you,
Jumal ise ütleb sinule,
Бог говорит тебе,
call unto me and I will answer you.
hüüa mind appi ja ma vastan sulle.
обратись ко мне, и я отвечу тебе.
But the Bible also says,
Kuid samuti piibel ütleb,
Но Библия также говорит,
how can you call upon a God you do not know?
et kuidas sa saad appi hüüda Jumalat.
These were the thousands who came to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then from Estonia, it began to spread. They called me to go into Lithuania. And the most amazing things happened in Vilnius. Look, now I'm going to show you literally the thousands who came. I think there was something like 12,000 every day in the meetings in Vilnius. Just look. I'm going to first, I want you to listen while I pray for you.
Ir kol aš melsiuosi, pirmiausia, aš noriu, kad jūs paklausytumėt.
вначале я хочу, чтобы вы послушали, когда я буду молиться за вас.
Father, thank you for these people.
Tėve, dėkoju už šios žmonės.
Отец, спасибо за этих людей.
I want you to love them as a father.
Ir aš noriu, kad tu juos mylėtumėj kaip tėvas.
Люби их, как отец.
Oh God, I want you to forgive every sin.
Atleisk kiekvieną jų nuodėmę.
О Боже, прости всякий грех.
Oh God, I pray that a powerful miracle will happen in their lives.
Ir tėve meldžiu, kad stebuklas, galingas stebuklas įvyktų jų gyvenime.
Боже, я молюсь, чтобы мощное чудо произошло в их жизни.
That this miracle will change them.
Kad šis stebuklas juos pakeistų.
Чтобы это чудо изменило их.
Forgive them in Jesus' name.
Atleiskim Jėzaus vardu.
Прости их во имя Иисуса.
And I want you to say this prayer with me.
Ir toliau aš noriu, kad jūs kartu su manimi pakartotumėt maldą.
Я попрошу вас повторять эту молитву вместе со мной.
Oh God, my Father,
Dieve mano tėve,
Скажите: Бог мой Отец,
I need Jesus.
man reikalingas Jėzus.
мне нужен Иисус.
Jesus, come into my life.
Jėzau, ateik į mano gyvenimą.
Иисус, приди в мою жизнь.
Forgive every sin.
Atleisk bet kokią nuodėmę.
Прости всякий грех.
I know I have sinned.
Aš žinau, kad nusidėjau,
Я знаю, что я согрешил,
But I believe that you love me.
bet aš tikiu, kad tu myli mane.
но я верю, что ты любишь меня.
I want a miracle in my life tonight.
Savo gyvenime šį vakarą noriu stebuklo.
Мне нужно чудо в моей жизни сегодня.
In Jesus' name.
Jėzaus vardu.
Во имя Иисуса.
Amen.
Amen.
But this was just to show and to demonstrate the power of God. We went the first year. And the power of God was so strong that actually the government invited me back. And they said, look, have 2 days in the stadium, but we want you to have a special meeting just for the members of the government, for the people in responsible positions in business and religious leaders. And so they took the Catholic cathedral in the center of Vilnius. And we had the National Opera Society, we had the National Choral Society presenting the fantastic music of Handel's Messiah to an invited audience of about 800 people who packed there. But they were people who were ambassadors, they were government ministers, they were religious leaders, they were influential people who came to hear the power of God and to hear, and this is the amazing thing, they came to hear the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus, the Son of God, Jesus from the very Bible, who could change men's lives. But if Jesus is alive, he can change men's lives. The Bible says
Biblija sako,
God has put all power
Dievas turi
in heaven
visą jėgą
and on earth
danguje,
in
žemėje,
Jesus.
Jėzuje.
All power,
Visa
all
jėga.
power in heaven,
Visa jėga danguje,
all power on earth.
visa jėga žemėje
Jesus has it.
ir Jėzus tai turi.
Hallelujah.
Aleliuja.
Now, if you want to believe,
Ir jeigu jūs norite tikėti,
if you want the power of God in your life,
jeigu norite Dievo jėgos savo
I'm
gyvenime,
going to ask you to stand.
aš noriu
I
paprašyti
want to
tave
pray for you.
atsistoti, aš noriu
I'm going
melstis
to
su
ask you,
tavimi.
if you want the power of God in your life,
Aš noriu paprašyti tavęs, jeigu
if
tu
you will
nori
confess this Jesus,
Dievo jėgos savo gyvenime,
I
jeigu
want every one of
išpažinsi.
you standing. Tonight we are going to see great miracles.
Ir šį vakarą mes matysim didžius stebuklus.
We're going to experience the power of God.
Mes patirsime Dievo jėgą.
And I'm going to wait while you come down from the balconies.
Ir aš lauksiu netgi, kada jūs iš balkono
If you
nusileisite.
want to see the power of God in your life,
Jeigu jūs norite savo gyvenime pamatyti
if
Dievo jėgą,
you will confess your sin,
jeigu jūs išpažinsite
if you
savo
will confess the
nuodėmes,
name of Jesus,
jeigu išpažinsite Jėzaus vardą,
if you tonight will believe that a miracle can happen for you,
jeigu šį vakarą tikėsi, kad tas stebuklas gali nutikti tau,
this is what Jesus says.
būtent tai Jėzus sako.
He says, I will come.
Jisai sako, aš ateisiu.
And he says to every one of you tonight,
Ir kiekvienam iš jūsų šį vakarą jisai
I
sako,
will come.
aš ateisiu.
And I want you to come and meet with Jesus.
Ir aš noriu, kad jūs ateitumėt ir susitiktumėt su
Let the
Jėzumi.
power of God come in your life.
Kad Dievo jėga ateitų į jūsų
Come on down
gyvenimą.
from those top balconies. Come on
Iš
down.
balkono prašom nusileisti.
And the result of this was that it's spreading. And then I was to be called into Latvia, back into Lithuania. And the final meetings came only just so recently as I'm speaking. It was only 4 months ago when we were invited to go to Poland. There, the most amazing scenes in Poland. Look, I'm going to show you Poland here. Look. And Jesus came to a city called Jericho, and when he went out, he saw a blind man called Bartimaeus standing at the side of the road. And when the blind man heard that Jesus was coming, he cried out, Jesus, Jesus, help! I'm going to pray with you. And I'm going to pray that God will open your eyes so that you'll understand who Jesus is. The Jesus that we're talking about is the Son of God. His power to set prisoners free, heal every sickness, forgive every sin. He loves every criminal. He loves every alcoholic. He loves every drug addict. He loves every child, every teenager, every mother, every father. He wants you. He's calling for you. He wants to be a father to you. God wants to be a father to you. A husband to the widow. A father to the fatherless. That's what he wants to give you. What happened was that over 2 days, more than 80,000 people came. Now, this has never happened before. Why would all these people come? Look, if religion is dead, and if Christ is dead, and if the Bible is not relevant, why would 80,000 people come to hear me just explain the simplicity of the truth of the gospel of Jesus? Why would they come? Because they are beginning to realize God has power today to change men's lives. If only we realized that God can take the alcoholics, the drunkards, the drug abusers, and God can dramatically change their lives. But it isn't just them. God needs to change us. Because when you see the corruption at every level in society, when you see the fact that almost every day people are being killed in the street, or in America, somebody kills the school children, or in Norway, kills dozens of people, innocent people. Why? Because without God, there is no hope. But God offers a way of forgiveness and a way of salvation. And if only you understood, what I'm showing you here is an evidence that God can do these same things today. And God can do it in your life, if you allow him to do it. This is the thing. God doesn't change wicked men unless they're willing. You know, it's said that with an alcoholic or a drug addict, we would say they need to go into rehabilitation. But the fact is that unless that alcoholic or that drug addict wants to get rid and wants to have a change, you'll never succeed. And when they come out, they go back to the alcohol, they go back to the drugs. There has got to be that desire. And what God is offering through Jesus Christ, a way to change your life. But you have to desire it. You have to ask him. You have to communicate with him. You've got to say, Lord, come into my life. And what you're seeing here is the evidence of people whose lives were changed. Simply through the preaching of the gospel. Well, what is the gospel? The gospel is the good news about Jesus Christ. And so I want you to really see, and then I want it to become a challenge in your own life. What are you going to do about the call of God and the challenge of God? That God can change your life, God can forgive sin. And I'm going to show you in this series of broadcasts, this series of programs, the reality of how God is in action today, changing men's lives. And we have the evidence, and we're showing it to you here. Thank you, by the way, for watching the program, but I want you to know more of the background behind this, and so I've written a book, because I live by faith, and what I do by faith. And I want to show you in this little booklet how your faith will work. Faith does work. Faith is something practical. It's not abstract. Faith is putting into practice what God teaches us. And so I want to send you this book. Look, I'm a sailor and I'm in front of the sea, the Mediterranean. I'm in Israel. What a place to talk about faith, because Jesus was a man of faith. He taught faith, he lived faith, and I want to share some of this with you. And so in this book, it will teach you how to make your faith work. I'll send it to you free. Just send a gift, however small, right to me, and the book is yours, and it will make your faith work. This is Prophetic Vision. It's the most powerful prophetic magazine in Europe today. It's read by almost 500,000 people in 132 countries around the world. Send for it free and let God show you the path to revival in your life, in your nation. The important thing is this, that we're able to bring you news of revival and of the power of God from right around the world in so many different countries. And also, while on the television broadcast, you only see just a short edited program of my message. On this program, you're able to see and hear the whole of the message. So I want to encourage you to watch this program.